That's her! The one who survived 14 rounds. They didn't whisper it. They spat it like she'd cheated death and embarrassed the men sent to deliver it. But Gunnery Sergeant Elena Cruz didn't care what they called her, because she remembered every bullet. Every second she bled out in the dust of Durka Ridge, every Marine who risked their life to drag her back, and the suicide bomber she tackled to save the ICU. She remembered him too. Now she's healed, promoted, armed, and she's going back, not as a patient, not as prey, but as the one thing they never expected, the hunter. This is Veteran Biker. Comment 1 if you're new, 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week. Like, subscribe, and stay to the end. The sun, a relentless eye of fire, beat down on the cracked earth of Durka Ridge. The air, thick with the scent of dust and diesel, shimmered off the corrugated tin roofs of bombed-out buildings. For Staff Sergeant Elena Cruz, 23 years old, the world had been reduced to a simple, brutal equation. The weight of her M4 carbine, the shifting patrol formations of her fire team, and the gut-deep knowledge that every corner could hide a ghost waiting to pull a trigger. Her unit, a tight-knit squad of Marines who had navigated this labyrinth of death for 7 months, moved with the practiced rhythm of a well-oiled machine. Behind her was Corporal Ray Mendoza, her squad leader, a man whose calm demeanor belied a ferocity forged in countless firefights. To her left, the watchful eyes of Lance Corporal Nia Vargas scanned rooftops with the same intensity she applied to maintaining her SAW machine gun. And to her right, Private First Class Malik Johnson, the newest member of their team, clutched his rifle with a focus that spoke of both fear and an unyielding will to prove himself. This was supposed to be a routine patrol, a show of force through the network of alleyways and streets that the locals called the maze. Their mission, to gather information on a recently active IED cell that had claimed 2 Marine lives the week before. The intelligence report, sourced from a jittery informant, had been vague, pointing only to a particular block on Al-Anbar Street. As Cruz rounded the corner of a half-demolished pharmacy, she felt a shift in the air, a silence that was too absolute for a city where the sounds of conflict were as constant as the heat. The first bullet came from her left, a whisper of death that became a sharp, blinding punch in her left shoulder. The impact spun her sideways, her M4 clattering against the concrete wall as hot metal and fabric exploded from her uniform. Her brain, trained for 1,000 combat scenarios, struggled to process the sensation. It wasn't a random shot. It felt deliberate, aimed with malicious precision. She had just 3 seconds to register the burning sensation before the second round punched through her right thigh, dropping her to one knee behind a pile of rubble that had once been someone's front steps. "Contact left! Contact left!" She screamed into her radio, her voice a raw, primal sound that was instantly drowned out by a storm of incoming fire. The masonry around her began to disintegrate under a hail of bullets, spitting chips of concrete and hot lead. The distinctive crack pop of an AK-47 echoed off the narrow street, mixing with the deeper rumble of insurgent PKM machine guns, positioned somewhere in the maze of buildings ahead. The third round, a sledgehammer blow to her chest, was stopped by her ceramic plate carrier. The fourth, a searing graze across her helmet, left her ears ringing and her vision swimming. Cruz pressed herself deeper into the rubble, her life flashing not in slow motion like the movies promised, but in rapid-fire snapshots. Her mother's face at boot camp graduation, her first firefight in Ramadi, the letter from her younger brother asking when she was coming home. The 5th through 8th rounds came in rapid succession, 2 more hitting her armor plates with bruising force, one tearing through the meat of her left forearm, another shattering against the concrete inches from her face, sending stone fragments into her cheek. Blood ran down her neck, mixing with sweat and the ever-present dust of Durka Ridge that clung to everything like a second skin. "Cruz, talk to me!" Corporal Ray Mendoza's voice crackled through her earpiece. Her squad leader was somewhere behind her, probably pinned down by the same crossfire that had turned this routine patrol into a nightmare. They had been hunting for an IED cell, but the sudden ferocity and coordination of the attack suggested something far more sinister. Following intelligence that pointed to this particular block of Durka Ridge, the ambush had been waiting. Cruz tried to respond, but her voice came out as a wheeze. The body armor had saved her life, but the kinetic energy transfer felt like being kicked by a mule twice. She forced air into her lungs and keyed her radio. "Still here, Corporal," taking effective fire from... Rounds 9 and 10 arrived together. One punching through her right shoulder and exiting clean, the other fragmenting against her rifle stock and sending wooden splinters into her neck. The pain was becoming abstract now, her body's natural morphine kicking in as adrenaline flooded her system. She could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, pushing blood through holes that shouldn't exist. Through the haze of pain and dust, Cruz caught movement in a second-story window across the street. Muzzle flash, she raised her carbine with trembling hands, her left arm barely functional, but her right still steady enough to find the front sight post. The figure in the window was young, maybe 16, wearing a Manchester United jersey over tactical webbing loaded with ammunition. Not a random fighter, but a planned part of a kill team. A teenager wearing a soccer jersey was an unconventional choice for a firefight. He squeezed the trigger twice, watching her rounds spark against the window frame as the shooter ducked back. Professional enough to keep shooting, young enough to make mistakes. The 11th round, meant for her, went high, cracking the air above her head. The 12th caught her in the hip, spinning bone fragments through muscle and drawing a scream that she hadn't known was building in her throat. "Marine down! Marine down!" Mendoza's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Cruz, we're coming for you! Negative!" She gasped into the radio, forcing herself to think tactically despite the growing fog in her head. "Too much fire! Hold position and call for backup!" But even as she said it, Cruz knew the mathematics of her situation. She was bleeding from at least 6 wounds, trapped in the open with minimal cover, facing an unknown number of insurgents who had chosen their kill zone well. Her squad was pinned 2 blocks away, and the nearest reinforcements were at least 20 minutes out in this labyrinth of a city where every intersection could hide an IED and every rooftop might conceal a sniper. The 13th round hit her in the lower back, just below her armor's coverage. She felt something important tear inside her, a spreading numbness that seemed to disconnect her legs from the rest of her body. Cruz tried to shift position and realized with crystal clarity that she couldn't feel her feet. The 14th and final bullet struck her left temple with surprising gentleness, more like a firm tap than the violent impact she expected. Her vision dimmed around the edges, but consciousness held on with stubborn Marine Corps tenacity. Blood ran into her left eye, turning the world red-tinted and surreal. Cruz lay among the rubble, her rifle still clutched in her right hand, listening to the continuing firefight that had shifted away from her position. The insurgents probably thought she was dead. 14 hits was more than enough to drop anyone, but Marines were trained to fight beyond the point where normal people would quit, to keep pulling triggers until the last breath left their bodies. She keyed her radio one final time, surprised that her thumb still worked. "Mendoza, I'm hit bad, real bad. Tell my mother." Her voice failed her then, but not her resolve. Cruz closed her eyes and began counting her remaining ammunition. 2 magazines left. If they came to confirm the kill, she'd make them pay for the privilege. The sun was beginning to set over Durka Ridge, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of the Arizona sunsets she'd grown up watching. She thought about her brother's letter, about the job at the auto shop he'd promised to hold for her, about the college classes she'd planned to take when her deployment ended in 6 months. Cruz pressed her face against the cool concrete and waited for whatever came next, her finger resting lightly on the trigger of her M4. She was 23 years old, bleeding from 14 gunshot wounds, and still ready to fight. Because that's what Marines did. That's what her drill instructors had hammered into her skull during the crucible at Paris Island, and what every day since had reinforced. Semper Fi, always faithful, even when the world was ending one bullet at a time. The sound of boots on broken glass reached her ears, multiple sets moving carefully but purposefully toward her position. Cruz smiled grimly and adjusted her grip on her rifle. Let them come. Corporal Ray Mendoza pressed his back against the wall of what had once been a barber shop. The Arabic script on the faded sign was still visible despite months of urban warfare. His heart hammered against his ribs as he listened to the radio chatter flooding his earpiece, calls for medevac, requests for fire support, situation reports from units scattered across Durka Ridge's deadly grid of streets. But underneath it all, there was silence from Cruz. Dragon 6, this is Bravo 21. Mendoza spoke into his radio, his voice steady despite the chaos. I have one Marine down, multiple GSWs, requesting immediate QRF and medevac support to grid 38 seconds MD 200 and 34 567. The response crackled back through the static. Bravo 21, QRF is en route, but encountering heavy resistance. ETA 30 mics, can you reach the casualty? Mendoza glanced around the corner toward Cruz's last known position. 200 meters of open ground had become a killing field. Muzzle flashes still winked from windows and rooftops, and the sporadic crack of rifle fire indicated the insurgents was still very much in control of the engagement area. Negative, Dragon 6. Too much effective fire. Behind him, the rest of his squad was spread across whatever cover they could find. Lance Corporal Nia Vargas crouched behind an overturned car, her saw machine gun trained on the building where most of the enemy fire originated. Private First Class Malik Johnson was treating a shrapnel wound on his forearm while simultaneously trying to spot targets through his rifle scope. "We can't leave her out there, Corporal," Vargas called out, not taking her eyes off her assigned sector. Mendoza knew she was right. Every Marine understood the promise, leave no one behind. But he also understood tactics, and sending his Marines into that kill zone would only create more casualties without helping Cruz. The insurgents had chosen their position well, probably spending days preparing overlapping fields of fire and escape routes. His radio squawked again. Bravo 21, be advised, Reaper 62 is inbound with CAS. ETA 15 mics, close air support. Mendoza felt a flicker of hope. Apache gunships could suppress the enemy positions long enough for his squad to reach Cruz. But 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours for someone bleeding out in the street. The sun had disappeared behind the jagged skyline of destroyed buildings, and the orange glow of fires reflected off the smoke that hung over the city like a shroud. Durka Ridge after dark was a different kind of hell, a maze where every shadow could hide a sniper and every sound might be the last thing you heard. Mendoza was reaching for his radio to coordinate with the incoming air support when he heard something that made his blood freeze, the distinctive whistle of an incoming mortar round. "Incoming!" he screamed, and his Marines dove for whatever cover they could find. The first round exploded 50 meters short, sending chunks of concrete and twisted metal flying through the air. The second was closer, shattering windows and filling the street with dust and debris. Mendoza pressed himself deeper into the doorway of the barber shop, feeling the concussion waves roll over him. But it was the third round that changed everything. The mortar shell landed directly on the building where most of the enemy muzzle flashes had been originating. The explosion was massive, far larger than a standard 82mm round should produce. Secondary explosions followed as stored ammunition and improvised explosives detonated in a chain reaction that lit up the night sky. "Jesus Christ," Johnson whispered, staring at the column of fire and smoke rising from the destroyed building. "What the hell was that?" Mendoza didn't answer immediately. He was too busy processing the sudden shift in the tactical situation. The enemy fire had dropped by at least 70%, and the remaining insurgents seemed to be withdrawing based on the decreasing volume of incoming rounds. "Must have hit their ammo dump," he finally said, keying his radio. "Dragon 6, this is Bravo 21. Large secondary explosion in the target building. Enemy fire significantly reduced. Requesting permission to move to casualty site. Stand by, Bravo 21. But Mendoza wasn't planning to stand by. Cruz had been down for almost 40 minutes now, and every minute decreased her chances of survival. He turned to his squad, 3 Marines who had followed him through hell for the past 8 months. "Listen up," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned respect through shared danger. "We're going to get Cruz. Vargas, you provide overwatch from here with the saw. Johnson, you're with me. We bound by fire, staying low, using whatever cover we can find. My orders are to bring every Marine home," Mendoza replied. "That includes Cruz." They moved out before Dragon 6 could respond to his request, using the smoke and dust from the mortar strikers' concealment. Mendoza led the way, his M4 carbine trained on the windows and doorways that could hide enemy fighters. Behind him, Johnson moved with the careful precision of a Marine who had learned that in Durka Ridge, the difference between life and death often came down to where you placed your next step. The 200 meters felt like 2 miles. They covered the final 50 meters in a desperate sprint. Mendoza dropped to his knees beside Cruz. She was alive, barely conscious, bleeding from more wounds than he could count. Her eyes tracked to his face with effort, and her lips moved. "Hey, Cruz," Mendoza said softly, pulling out his trauma kit. "We're getting you out of here." Cruz's lips formed a single word that Mendoza had to lean close to hear. 14. "What's that? 14 rounds." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was a declaration of defiance. She had been hit 14 times and was still conscious, still fighting. It was medically impossible, but Marines had a way of redefining impossible when their lives depended on it. Mendoza's radio squawked urgently. "Bravo 21, QRF is at your location. Pop smoke and identify your position." He tossed a purple smoke grenade into the street. Seconds later, Marine assault amphibious vehicles rounded the corner, their 50 caliber machine guns traversing for targets. The cavalry had arrived. Mendoza watched as they loaded her onto a stretcher and carried her toward the waiting armored vehicle that would take her to the forward surgical team. As the convoy prepared to move out, Mendoza took one last look at the rubble-strewn intersection where his Marine had fought for her life against impossible odds. The drive to Camp Fallujah took 18 minutes. Mendoza sat beside Cruz's stretcher, watching the corpsman monitor her vital signs. "Her vitals are stable," a corpsman said quietly. "Whoever did the initial trauma care probably saved her life." Mendoza nodded, remembering his own hands working in the darkness. As the convoy pulled through the gates of Camp Fallujah, the surgical team was waiting. They transferred Cruz from the AAV to the surgical table, her blood-stained uniform telling the story of her impossible survival. 14 rounds. As the surgical team disappeared into their operating theater, Mendoza felt the exhaustion that had been building throughout the night, but he also felt a growing sense that Cruz's survival was about more than medical miracles. He had a feeling that her story was just beginning. After the medevac, Mendoza pulled out his radio and contacted his squad, who were still holding the intersection where Cruz had fallen. All Bravo stations, sit rep. Vargas's voice came back immediately. All secure, Corporal. But we've got something you need to see. In the basement of the bombed-out building, Vargas and Johnson had discovered a major intelligence cache. The hidden room contained detailed maps of Durka Ridge with marine patrol routes marked in red ink and surveillance photos of individual Marines, including several clear shots of crews. They've been watching us for months, Johnson whispered. The cache also held documents written in Arabic, technical manuals for IEDs, and American military equipment. The most disturbing discovery was a detailed dossier on Elena Cruz, complete with her photograph, family information, and daily routines. The insurgents had been planning to either capture or kill her specifically. They weren't just shooting at a Marine, Mendoza said quietly after seeing the evidence. They were executing a planned target. The discovery was briefed to Captain Rebecca Morales, the battalion intelligence officer. The level of detail and organization was far beyond what they had encountered from typical insurgent cells. Morales studied Cruz's dossier with professional interest. Someone wanted her dead very badly. The question is why? As the intelligence team worked, they uncovered evidence of a sophisticated insurgent network with ties to other cells and external funding. Message traffic on a laptop indicated that Cruz's survival had been reported to higher command, and new operational orders were already being issued. One message read, "Target survived. Initiate backup plan." Mendoza felt his stomach tighten. Cruz was alive but still in danger. He turned to Morales. "Ma'am, I need to get to Baghdad. If they're planning another attempt on Cruz, she needs protection." Morales considered this for a moment. "I'll arrange transportation, but you're not going alone." As dawn broke over Durka Ridge, Mendoza gathered his squad. Cruz had survived 14 rounds, but the war for her life was far from over. They boarded the helicopter heading toward Baghdad. The war had followed them, but Mendoza intended to be there when it arrived. Elena Cruz was barely aware of the journey to Baghdad. The world was a blur of muffled voices, the rhythmic vibration of the ARV, and a swirling haze of pain. When she finally regained full consciousness, she found herself in the controlled chaos of a military medical facility, the Capital Basin Military Hospital in Baghdad's international zone. Major Dr. Sarah Cheng, the head trauma surgeon, was leaning over her, a look of professional amazement on her face. "Staff Sergeant Cruz," Dr. Cheng said, her voice calm and authoritative. "You gave us quite a scare. 14 gunshot wounds, 7 through and through, 3 stopped by your body armor, 4 requiring surgical intervention. You should be dead." Dr. Michael Roberts, a Navy corpsman who had been treating combat casualties for 3 years, shook his head in amazement. "I've seen Marines survive incredible trauma, but this is beyond anything in the medical literature. Her vitals are actually improving." Cruz had been unconscious for most of the first day after her arrival, her body fighting to recover from massive blood loss and trauma. But when she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she asked for wasn't water or pain medication. She wanted to know about her squad. "They're fine," Dr. Cheng had told her, checking the surgical sites for signs of infection. "Your corporal and 3 other Marines are flying in from Durka Ridge this morning. They want to make sure you're safe." Cruz had tried to sit up despite the monitors and IV lines connecting her to various machines. Safe from what? The insurgents are in Durka Ridge, not Baghdad. Dr. Cheng and Dr. Roberts exchanged glances. Military intelligence had briefed them on the potential threat to Cruz's life, but they hadn't shared the details with the patient yet. The discovery of the intelligence cache had revealed that Cruz wasn't just another casualty. She was a specific target whose survival represented a significant failure for the insurgent network. "Let's focus on your recovery first," Dr. Cheng said diplomatically. "Your body has been through tremendous trauma, but Cruz wasn't easily deflected. 3 tours in Iraq had taught her to read between the lines, to recognize when adults were trying to protect her from information she needed to know." "Doc, what aren't you telling me?" Before Dr. Cheng could respond, her pager buzzed with an urgent message. "Security alert. Potential threat to patient in room 247. Cruz was in room 247. "I need to step outside for a moment, Doctor," Cheng said, trying to keep her voice casual, but Cruz caught the change in her tone immediately. "How bad is it?" Cruz asked as Dr. Cheng reached the door. The surgeon paused, looking back at a young woman who had survived 14 gunshot wounds and was still asking the right questions. "Bad enough that your friends are flying 300 miles to make sure you're okay?" In the hallway outside Cruz's room, Dr. Cheng met with Colonel Ava Lang, the hospital security chief. Colonel Lang had been a military police officer before transitioning to hospital administration, and she understood both medical needs and security threats. "Intel says there are at least 3 insurgent cells in Baghdad with orders to eliminate Cruz," Colonel Lang said quietly. "They've identified her as a high-value target whose survival is damaging to their operational credibility." Dr. Cheng felt her stomach tighten. In 18 months of treating combat casualties, she had never dealt with a situation where the enemy followed patients to the hospital. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "Unknown, but intelligence intercepts suggest they're moving assets into Baghdad as we speak. The Marines from her unit should arrive within the hour." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air outside the hospital. Dr. Cheng looked out the window to see a Marine transport helicopter settling onto the hospital's landing pad, its crew chief already signaling to the passengers inside. Corporal Ray Mendoza was the first off the helicopter, followed by Nia Vargas, Malik Johnson, and 2 other Marines Dr. Cheng didn't recognize. All 5 were in full combat gear, their weapons clean and ready despite the early morning flight from Durka Ridge. Mendoza headed straight for the information desk, his face showing the strain of the past 24 hours. "I'm looking for Staff Sergeant Cruz, room 247. "Are you family?" the desk clerk asked automatically. "I'm her squad leader," Mendoza replied. "And I'm the reason she's alive." Dr. Cheng approached the group before the clerk could create any administrative delays. "Corporal Mendoza, I'm Major Cheng, Cruz's surgeon. She's been asking about you." Mendoza's expression softened slightly. "How is she, Doc?" "Remarkably well, considering she was shot 14 times 36 hours ago. But we have a problem." Dr. Cheng briefed Mendoza on the security situation as they walked towards Cruz's room. The corporal's face grew grimmer with each detail, but he didn't seem surprised by the information. "We found their intelligence cache in Durka Ridge," he told Dr. Cheng. "They had detailed files on Cruz, including surveillance photos and operational plans. This isn't random. They've been planning to kill her for months." They reached Cruz's room to find 2 military police officers standing guard outside the door. Inside, Cruz was propped up in bed, looking pale but alert. Her left arm was in a sling and bandages covered most of her visible wounds, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Mendoza," she said as her squad leader entered the room, "tell me you got the bastards who shot me." "We got some of them," Mendoza replied, pulling a chair beside her bed, "but we also found out why they wanted you dead." Cruz listened without interruption as Mendoza explained the intelligence cache, the surveillance photos, and the ongoing threat to her life. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "So, they're coming to Baghdad," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "Intel thinks so. Could be a few hours, could be a few days, but they're not going to let you walk away from this Cruz tried to shift in the bed, wincing as the movement pulled at her surgical sites. "Then we need to be ready for them." Dr. Cheng stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant, you're in no condition to be planning military operations. You've lost 40% of your blood volume, and you're barely 12 hours out of surgery." "Doc, with respect," Cruz said, "I've been fighting these people for 3 tours. I know how they think, and I know they won't stop until I'm dead or they are." Cruz looked at Mendoza. "What's the plan?" Mendoza had been thinking about exactly that question during the helicopter flight from Durka Ridge. The hospital was secure, but it was also a confined space with limited escape routes. If insurgents managed to penetrate the facility, Cruz would be trapped. "We turn you into bait," he said finally. "Explain." "They want you dead because you survived their assassination attempt. Your survival makes them look incompetent to their leadership and their financial backers. So we let them think they have another chance to finish the job." Vargas, who had been quietly observing from near the door, spoke up. "Corporal, that's asking Cruz to risk her life again. She's already been shot 14 times. And I'm still here," Cruz said firmly, "which means I'm either very lucky or very good at staying alive. Either way, I'd rather face them when I know they're coming than spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." Dr. Roberts entered the room with Cruz's latest lab results. Her blood work is actually improving faster than we expected. White cell count is normal, hemoglobin is coming up, and there are no signs of infection at any of the surgical sites. Dr. Cheng reviewed the results with professional amazement. "This is medically unusual. Most patients with this level of trauma would be in intensive care for at least a week." "Marines aren't most patients," Cruz said with a slight smile. "How soon can I get out of here medically? You should stay at least 3 more days. Realistically, if you're determined to leave, I can discharge you tomorrow morning with strict instructions for wound care and follow-up." Mendoza was already thinking tactically. If we move her tomorrow, we can choose the time and place, set up an ambush instead of waiting for them to hit the hospital. Colonel Lang had been listening from the doorway. "Corporal, are you suggesting we use a wounded Marine as bait to draw out insurgents in the middle of Baghdad?" "I'm suggesting we give them what they want, a chance at Cruz, but on our terms instead of theirs." Cruz was nodding slowly, her mind working through the possibilities. "What kind of setup are you thinking? Fake medical transfer? We leak information that you're being moved to another facility for specialized treatment. They'll try to hit the convoy en route." "That's assuming they take the bait," Johnson said. "What if they don't?" "Then we keep Cruz secure until they make their move and we deal with whatever they try," Mendoza replied. "But my guess is they'll go for the convoy. It gives them better chances of success than trying to penetrate a military hospital." Cruz was quiet for several minutes, considering the risks and alternatives. Finally, she looked at Mendoza with the expression he had seen before difficult missions in Durka Ridge. "When do we do it?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Gives us time to set up the route and coordinate with Baghdad's security forces." Dr. Cheng shook her head. "I cannot recommend this course of action from a medical standpoint. Cruz needs rest and recovery time." "Doc, I'll have plenty of time to rest when these people stop trying to kill me," Cruz replied. "Right now, the best medicine is eliminating the threat." As the medical team prepared to leave, Mendoza gathered his Marines for operational planning. The next 24 hours would determine whether Cruz's survival of 14 rounds had been the end of her story or just the beginning. "Vargas, I need you to coordinate with hospital security on defensive positions. Johnson, work with the MPs on patrol schedules and threat assessment. We're going to assume they're already watching the hospital." "What about the transfer?" Vargas asked. "I'll coordinate that with Baghdad tactical units. We need enough firepower to handle whatever they throw at us, but not so much that it looks like a setup." Cruz was listening to the planning with professional interest despite her injuries. "Mendoza, make sure you have air support on standby. If they're serious about this, they'll come with more than small arms." Already on it, Mendoza confirmed. Apache gunships will be in the area, and we'll have fast-mover jets on call if things get complicated. As evening settled over Baghdad, Mendoza positioned his Marines around Cruz's room while intelligence analysts worked to intercept insurgent communications. The hospital had become the center of a deadly game of chess, with Cruz as the queen that both sides were trying to protect or capture. At 2,100 hours, the first intercepted communication confirmed their suspicions. Arabic voices discussing the target and tomorrow's opportunity. The insurgents had taken the bait. Mendoza keyed his radio to update Dragon 6 on the situation. "We're confirmed for enemy interest. They're planning something for tomorrow." "Roger that, Bravo 21. Be advised, we've identified at least 3 different insurgent cells converging on Baghdad. This is bigger than we initially thought." Mendoza wasn't surprised. Cruz's survival had clearly triggered a major response from the insurgent network. They were bringing everything they had to ensure that their second attempt wouldn't fail. He looked through the window of Cruz's room where she was sleeping. Despite the pain medication and the stress of knowing that enemies were planning her death, she had survived 14 rounds through a combination of skill, luck, and pure determination. Tomorrow would test all 3 again. "Get some rest," he told his Marines. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But even as he said it, Mendoza knew that sleep would be difficult. Somewhere in Baghdad, insurgents were finalizing their plans to kill Cruz. The only question was whether Mendoza and his Marines would be ready for whatever came next. The war that had started in Durka Ridge Street was moving to its next phase, and the stakes were higher than ever. Cruz had survived 14 rounds, but tomorrow would determine whether she survived the war. The plan had been set in motion. The morning sun rose over Baghdad, its light illuminating a city simmering with unspoken tension. Cruz, discharged against Major Cheng's strong medical advice, was moved to a secure room on the 4th floor of the hospital. The room had been transformed into an overwatch position with a clear view of the city streets below. A decoy convoy of 3 armored vehicles with full military escort was scheduled to depart at 1,400 hours, carrying a fake patient and a false hope of a clean escape. Mendoza's team, with the help of Colonel Lang's security personnel, had meticulously prepared. They had secured the area around Cruz's room, established communication links with Baghdad tactical units, and pre-staged air support. The plan was audacious and hinged on the insurgents' predictability. "This is insane," Colonel Lang had said. "We're using a wounded Marine as a sniper to ambush insurgents in the middle of Baghdad. We're ending a threat that won't go away on its own," Cruz had replied, her voice firm despite the bandages and the pain. At 1,300 hours, a specialized military courier delivered a M40, a 3-sniper rifle, match-grade ammunition, and a precision scope. Cruz, her right arm functional and steady despite the healing wounds, test-fired the weapon on the hospital's maintenance level. Her marksmanship was as sharp as ever. "Muscle memory," she had explained, placing 5 rounds in a 2-inch group at 100 meters. "Some things you don't forget." At 1,400 hours, the decoy convoy pulled out of the hospital compound, heading toward the planned ambush site. From her position on the 4th floor, Cruz watched through her rifle scope, the crosshairs a silent promise of vengeance. The insurgents, having taken the bait, were now moving into position. "Overwatch to convoy," she transmitted, her voice steady. "I have eyes on your route. No movement at the primary intercept point yet." But even as she spoke, she caught a glint of metal from a building adjacent to the overpass. An insurgent was moving into position with what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade. The ambush was about to begin. "Contact front," she transmitted calmly, settling the rifle's crosshairs on her first target. Engaging. The M40 A3 bucked against her shoulder, The bullet crossed 400 meters in less than half a second, striking the insurgent and sending his RPG clattering to the street. She quickly acquired her next target, an enemy sniper, his rifle scope winking in the sun. This insurgent, wearing American military gear that could only have come from the black market, was a professional, and his presence confirmed the sophisticated nature of the threat. She squeezed the trigger, and the sniper pitched backward from his rooftop position. 2 down, she reported, at least 4 more to go. The insurgents, realizing their ambush was failing, began adapting. Muzzle flashes erupted from multiple positions as they began suppressing her firing location with automatic weapons fire. Bullets sparked off the hospital's concrete facade, some whistling past the window. "Taking effective fire," she reported, pulling back slightly from her exposed position. "They've identified my location." She moved to a new window, revealing 2 insurgents who had been hidden from her original location. She took the machine gunner first, a 350-meter shot that silenced the weapon that had been suppressing Mendoza's convoy. Her 5th shot dropped a grenade thrower. The insurgents were breaking, their carefully planned ambush becoming a shooting gallery. The convoy, now clear, accelerated through the kill zone, leaving a trail of eliminated threats behind. But the insurgents weren't finished. As Mendoza's convoy cleared the immediate danger area, the distinctive whistle of an incoming mortar round filled the air. Someone had called for indirect fire support, targeting Cruz's position in the hospital. The concussion from the explosions rattled the entire building, shattering windows and sending debris flying. "Overwatch, report status." Mendoza's voice was urgent on the radio. "Still operational," she reported, checking herself for new injuries. "But they're bringing everything they have." From her new position, she could see insurgents gathering in the street below, preparing for a ground assault on the hospital. They assumed the sniper was dead or wounded, but they were wrong. Before they could begin their assault, Apache gunships, which Mendoza had requested, filled the air. "Overwatch, this is Thunder," the lead Apache pilot transmitted. "We have eyes on multiple hostiles. You are cleared hot." The Apache's 30mm cannon opened fire with a sound like thunder, sending explosive rounds into the street and decimating the insurgent force. The battle for Cruz's life, which had started in a street in Durka Ridge, had reached a new climax in Baghdad, with Cruz as the predator, not the prey. Days later, intelligence revealed the insurgents' true plan. They were going to destroy the aid station where Cruz was first treated. This wasn't just about killing her anymore, it was about revenge against everyone who had helped her survive. Against medical orders, Cruz, her wounds still healing, joined Mendoza's unit in returning to Durka Ridge. "This could be exactly what they want," Mendoza warned her on the flight back. "Drawing you back to finish what they started." "Maybe," she replied, checking her rifle for the 3rd time. "But they made a mistake when they decided to target medical personnel. Some lines you don't cross." The aid station at Camp Fallujah, a modest facility that had treated thousands of casualties, became the center of a defensive perimeter. Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, the senior medic, briefed Cruz on the facility's layout and defensive capabilities. The patients inside, none of them stable enough to be moved, were the main priority. The aid station could not be evacuated, it had to be held at all costs. The assault began at 0145 hours. It was not a company-sized assault as Intel had predicted, but a full-scale attack with more than 40 insurgents using mortars and coordinated ground assaults. They were well-trained, disciplined, and professional. "This isn't 30 fighters," Cruz transmitted grimly from the aid station's roof. "This is a full-scale attack." The mortar fire was devastatingly accurate, targeting defensive positions and creating gaps in the perimeter. Cruz, using her sniper rifle, began eliminating targets with deadly precision. She dropped an insurgent machine gunner and an RPG gunner, silencing weapons that had been pinning down Mendoza's squad. But there were too many targets for one sniper. Insurgents were breaching the aid station's perimeter on multiple sides. "Overwatch to all stations," she transmitted. "I'm coming down." Abandoning her sniper position, she rappelled down the aid station's exterior wall, landing in the courtyard where Mendoza's squad was fighting desperately to hold the main entrance. She took a prone firing position beside him, her rifle a blur of motion as she engaged targets at close range. It was during this desperate close-quarters combat that the new climax occurred. A figure emerged from the chaos, a man in tactical webbing with a bulging vest. He was running directly toward the aid station's ICU wall. He was a suicide bomber. Cruz's mind flashed back to the mortar strike that had saved her life. This was the same kind of explosive power, but delivered with deliberate, cold-blooded malice. There was no time to use her rifle. She sprinted toward the man, a desperate last-second calculation running through her mind. She tackled him with a flying leap, her body slamming into his just before he could detonate his vest. The two of them hit the ground with a sickening thud, their bodies tumbling into a small ditch just outside the ICU wall. With the man on the ground, Cruz didn't hesitate. She used the momentum of the tackle to pin him, her right arm wrapping around his neck. She jammed her knife deep into his throat, severing his spinal cord, ensuring he couldn't detonate the vest. His body went limp, his eyes wide with surprise and a grim resignation. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the battle raged on. The sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Apache gunships, which Mendoza had requested, appeared on the horizon. "Dragon 6, this is Thunder 11. We have eyes on multiple hostiles at your location. You are cleared hot." The Apache's 30mm cannon opened fire with devastating effect, sending explosive rounds into the insurgent formations that were assaulting the aid station. The ground assault broke, and survivors scrambled for cover. The tide had turned, and the aid station had been saved. As the sun began to break over Durka Ridge, Cruz, bleeding from her reopened wounds and bruised from the fall, stood beside Mendoza, watching the last shots fired. She had survived 14 rounds, an assassination attempt in Baghdad, and now a full-scale assault. But more than that, she had proven that Marines didn't just survive impossible odds, they came back stronger, more dangerous, and ready to protect the people who had saved their lives. The sun began to peek over the horizon, casting a pale, exhausted light on the devastated landscape of Camp Fallujah. The siege had been long and brutal, but the Echo aid station had held. The arrival of the Apache gunships had shattered the insurgent ground assault, turning a meticulously planned offensive into a chaotic retreat. As the last of the enemy fire subsided, a heavy, disquieting silence fell over the base, broken only by the hum of generators and the distant wail of incoming medevac helicopters. Elena Cruz, bruised and battered, her wounds reopened from the close-quarters struggle with the suicide bomber, stood beside Corporal Mendoza. Her body was screaming in protest, but her mind was already processing the tactical aftermath. "It's over," Mendoza said, his voice raw with fatigue, as he surveyed the smoking wreckage of the insurgent assault force. "Maybe," Cruz replied, her eyes scanning the battlefield, "but I don't think they're done with us yet." Her intuition proved correct. As the sun climbed higher, the full scope of the attack became clear. This wasn't a simple assault, it was a full-scale offensive with a clear strategic objective: overwhelm American forces and destroy the medical infrastructure that kept them in the fight. The enemy dead were a testament to the scale of the operation. Among the bodies of local insurgents, military intelligence and combat engineers found something chilling. Some of the enemy fighters were foreign operatives, highly trained and well-equipped. Captain Rebecca Morales, who had flown in to assess the situation, quickly briefed Cruz and Mendoza. "We've identified foreign operatives among the dead. The level of training and discipline was well beyond what we see from local cells. We've got confirmed dead from Syria and Iran." The news sent a jolt through Cruz. The kid in the soccer jersey in Durka Ridge was just the beginning. This was a sophisticated international network. "They weren't just fighting us," Cruz said, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "They were using us to test their tactics." The discovery of the foreign operatives was a major turning point. The initial intel had suggested a local insurgent plot, but the siege of the Echo aid station revealed a much darker reality. Morales explained that the enemy leadership was treating Cruz's survival not just as a failure, but as a strategic humiliation. "Your survival is an embarrassment to their command structure," Staff Sergeant Morales said. "It undermines their credibility and suggests their tactics are flawed. They're not just trying to kill you, they're trying to erase the symbol of their failure." With the aid station now secured and a new defensive perimeter established, Cruz returned to her original mission, Overwatch. Despite her protests, Dr. Cheng had insisted on treating her wounds, but Cruz was determined to stay in the fight. She took up a position on the aid station's roof, binoculars in hand, surveying the city that had tried to kill her and the Marines who had fought to save her. From her vantage point, she coordinated the final protective fires with Mendoza and Vargas. The night had left Camp Fallujah scarred, but not broken. Mendoza's squad, battered but defiant, manned their positions around the aid station. Vargas, her saw machine gun still hot from the battle, provided a constant, watchful eye, her gaze fixed on the enemy's last known positions. "Vargas, any movement on the east flank?" Cruz transmitted, her voice cutting through the morning stillness. "Negative, Gunny," Vargas replied, using Cruz's newly earned promotion from her recent combat actions. "Just smoke and rubble." The arrival of a full battalion of Marine reinforcements was a welcome sight. The Apache helicopters, a roaring presence throughout the final hours of the siege, now provided a high-altitude deterrent, their pilots scanning the city for any lingering threats. The insurgents had been decisively defeated, their carefully coordinated assault turned into a rout. In the aftermath, Captain Morales and her intelligence team worked tirelessly, sifting through the evidence left behind. The bodies of the foreign operatives were a goldmine of information, providing new insights into the enemy's training, command structure, and international ties. The assault on the aid station had been a desperate, high-stakes gamble, but it had backfired spectacularly, giving American forces an unprecedented look into the heart of the insurgent network. As Cruz watched the sun set on the second day since the siege, she felt a profound shift within her. She was no longer just a Marine who had survived a horrific ambush. She was a living symbol, a tactical asset, and a walking testament to the enemy's failure. Her survival had not only saved her life, but had also exposed a far larger threat, one that reached beyond the dusty streets of Durka Ridge. The intelligence reports began to paint a terrifying picture. The network wasn't just confined to Iraq, it was a sophisticated, well-funded organization with ties to terrorist groups and state-sponsored actors across the Middle East. They were a shadow military, a clandestine army using the chaos of the Iraqi insurgency to train and equip their operatives. Cruz had inadvertently stumbled upon their main nerve center. "They're treating you like a strategic failure," Mendoza told her, standing beside her on the rooftop. "They can't accept that one Marine could survive what they planned for months. It's a wound to their ego, a crack in their facade of invincibility." Cruz nodded, the exhaustion finally giving way to a renewed sense of purpose. The enemy had made it personal. They had tried to kill her not once but twice. They had targeted the people who had saved her life. and in doing so, they had given her a reason to keep fighting. "Then we use that," she said, her voice a low growl. "We use their paranoia, their wounded pride, and their need to save face. We turn their strategic failure into their final mistake." The war wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Cruz had survived 14 rounds, but that was just the opening act. Now, armed with new intelligence and a fire of personal purpose, she was ready to take the fight to them. The prey was about to become the predator, and the hunters were about to learn what happens when you anger a Marine who refuses to die. The battle for Durka Ridge had ended, but the war for her soul was just getting started. The intelligence reports flowed in, a torrent of data that painted a horrifying and detailed picture of the enemy. Captain Rebecca Morales and her team worked around the clock, sifting through the evidence recovered from the Durka Ridge cache and the bodies of the foreign operatives. The picture that emerged was not of a local insurgency, but of a sophisticated, well-funded and international network on. The tactical debriefing took place in a secure conference room at Camp Fallujah. The atmosphere was charged with a mixture of grim satisfaction and cold fury. Present were Cruz, Mendoza, Morales, and a host of senior officers, all of whom had come to understand the gravity of the situation too. Based on the documentation and biometric data we've recovered, the network is not just operating in Iraq, Morales explained, pointing to a sprawling map on a large screen 3. It's a training and command facility in Syria, about 50 kilometers from the Iraqi border. 4. The room fell silent. This wasn't a local problem anymore. This was a direct threat to American interests across the Middle East. The facility was a central hub, a nerve center for operations throughout Iraq, Afghanistan, and other theaters. 5. Its destruction would cripple the network, cutting off its supply chains, communication, and leadership. 6. The facility is run by a former Iraqi Republican Guard colonel named Qasem Jabbar, Morales continued, bringing up a photograph of a man with a distinctive scar on his face. He's been training insurgent cells for the past 2 years. 7. We have confirmed intel that he was personally involved in planning the attacks against Staff Sergeant Cruz and the Echo aid station. 8. Cruz felt a cold knot of resolve tighten in her gut. This wasn't a faceless enemy anymore. This was a man with a name and a face, a man who had tried to kill her and who had targeted the Marines and medics who had saved her life. The time for being hunted was over. The time for hunting had begun. Morales turned to a senior officer. "Sir, a joint raid by Delta Force and Marine Recon has been greenlit. The objective is to destroy the facility, capture Jabbar and other high-value targets, and recover any remaining intelligence." The officer nodded, then looked directly at Cruz. "Staff Sergeant Cruz, due to your unique and personal experience with this network, you are being invited to join the operation. The mission leaders believe your insights into their tactics and command structure will be invaluable." Cruz's heart pounded. This was it, the chance to end the threat permanently. "I'll go," she said, her voice steady and clear, "but not as an intelligence asset. I go as a Marine with a rifle, ready to finish what they started in Durka Ridge 11. Her declaration was met with a respectful silence. They understood this wasn't about vengeance for Cruz. It was about bringing an end to a network that had caused immeasurable pain and suffering to American forces. 12. The raid team assembled at a forward operating base near the Syrian border. It was a formidable force, a mixture of Delta Force soldiers, Marine Recon personnel, and intelligence specialists. 3. Master Sergeant Caleb Wynn, the Delta Force team leader, was a seasoned veteran with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. 14. He briefed the assault plan over the helicopter's intercom system. The facility consists of 4 main buildings arranged around a central courtyard, Wynn explained, pointing to satellite photos on a tactical screen. Intelligence indicates 30 to 40 fighters on site, with unknown numbers of instructors and administrators. The rules of engagement are simple. Anyone with a weapon is a legitimate target, but we need key personnel alive for Interrogation 15. Cruz sat in the cabin of the MH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, her M4 carbine gleaming in the dim light. Beside her was Corporal Mendoza, who had insisted on joining the Mission 16. "I'm not letting you go back there alone, Staff Sergeant," he had said. "Besides, someone needs to have your back." The helicopter flew low over the Syrian desert, its crew using terrain masking to avoid radar detection. 17. Cruz felt the familiar pre-combat tension building in her chest, but it was different this time. Instead of being hunted, she was the hunter. Instead of reacting to enemy attacks, she was taking the initiative against the people who had tried to kill her and targeted the Marines who had saved her life. 18. The Black Hawk touched down 3 kilometers from the target facility. The team moved with the silent, tactical precision of a well-drilled machine. Cruz, her night vision goggles giving the desert a ghostly green hue, moved with a sense of purpose that transcended her recent injuries. She was here for a reason, and she wasn't leaving until the job was done. Overwatch in position reported a new Marine sniper named Dana Rivas, whose calm voice came over the radio. 19. She had been brought in to provide long-range support during the assault. Wynn's team moved to breach the main building while Cruz, accompanied by Mendoza and 2 intelligence specialists, headed toward the facility's communication center. Their objective was to capture computer equipment and documents that would provide insight into the network's operations throughout the region. Movement in Building 2, Rivas reported. Multiple individuals with weapons moving toward defensive positions. 20. The facility's guards had detected the American presence, and a firefight erupted. Contact left. Wynn transmitted. Multiple shooters, automatic weapons. 21. Cruz and her team reached the communications building, a concrete bunker with reinforced walls. The explosive specialist, Sergeant First Class David Park, set his breach charges, and the door exploded inward. They entered the building to find a sophisticated command center with computer systems, communication equipment, and training materials that represented a significant investment in insurgent capability. 22. "Holy shit," whispered one of the intelligence specialists, Amanda Chun. "This is a full-scale intelligence operation." 23. Cruz examined training manuals that detailed assassination techniques, urban warfare tactics, and psychological operations, all written in multiple languages and clearly intended for export to insurgent groups worldwide. 24. "Mendoza, you need to see this," she transmitted to her squad leader. But before he could respond, she heard footsteps in the corridor. Insurgents were moving to destroy the sensitive materials. "We've got company," she announced, taking a defensive position at the doorway. Her M4 barked twice, dropping the first insurgent. 2 more appeared, moving with coordinated tactics. Cruz and Park's combined marksmanship eliminated them before they could reach the communication center. "Clear," Cruz announced, but she could hear more movement. The intelligence team was working rapidly, but time was running out. "Overwatch, this is Cruz," she transmitted to Rivas. "Can you give me a count on remaining hostiles?" "I count at least 15 fighters still active," Rivas replied. "They're trying to establish a defensive perimeter around Building 425. Building 4. That was where intelligence indicated the facility's leadership would be. Qasem Jabbar was there. Wynn, this is Cruz." She transmitted to the Delta Force team leader. "I'm moving to Building 4 to secure high-value targets." "Negative, Cruz. Stay with the intelligence team." But Cruz was already moving. This wasn't just about intelligence gathering, this was personal. She moved tactically through the firefight-lit courtyard, her rifle trained on the windows and doorways that could hide enemy fighters. She reached the entrance to Building 4, a reinforced steel door with electronic locks 26. Using a small charge, she breached the door and entered a command center that rivaled anything she had seen in American military facilities. Sitting at the central command station, desperately trying to destroy computer files, was Qasem Jabbar. "Stop!" Cruz commanded, her rifle trained on the former Republican Guard colonel. Jabbar looked up, his scarred face showing recognition. "Staff Sergeant Elena Cruz," he said in accented English, "the woman who survived 14 rounds." "That's right," Cruz replied. "And now I'm here to return the favor." Jabbar slowly raised his hands, but his eyes were calculating. He was looking for an opportunity. "You have become quite famous in our network. Your survival has caused significant problems for our operations." "Good," Cruz replied. "That was the point." She heard footsteps behind her, more insurgents approaching. "You cannot escape," Jabbar said confidently. "My men will kill you and your death will restore our credibility." Cruz smiled grimly. "Your men tried that in Durka Ridge. Didn't work out so well for them." She quickly forced Jabbar into a secure room, establishing a defensive position at the doorway. "Overwatch, this is Cruz. I have Jabbar secured in Building 4. Need extraction when you can manage it." "Roger that," Rivas replied, "but we've got a problem. More vehicles approaching from the east. Looks like reinforcements." The facility's defenders were being reinforced, which could turn a successful raid into a prolonged siege. The assault team needed to extract before they were overwhelmed. "Morrison, this is Cruz," she transmitted to Wynne, using the call sign of his Delta Force team. "What's your status on the primary objectives?" "Building 1 is secure, intelligence materials recovered, but we need to extract before those reinforcements arrive." Cruz looked at Jabbar, then at her radio. He was a high-value target, but his capture was slowing down their departure. She made a quick decision. "Roger, bringing the package out," she said. She pulled Jabbar to his feet and began moving toward the extraction point. The courtyard was a running firefight as the assault team fought their way out. The Black Hawk helicopters arrived, but they were taking heavy fire from insurgent positions 27. "Taking heavy fire," the lead pilot transmitted. "Can't hold this position much longer, 28. Cruz pushed Jabbar toward a waiting Delta Force soldier. "Take him. I'm going to help with suppression." "Cruz, get on the bird," Wynne ordered. But she was already moving, her rifle engaging insurgent positions with the precision marksmanship that had made her a target in the first place. Muzzle flash from a second-story window. 2 rounds from Cruz's M4. Target eliminated. "Nice shooting," Rivas confirmed over the radio 29. Cruz continued engaging threats as the assault team loaded onto the helicopters. As the last bird settled into the landing zone, she made a final dash, boarding just as the insurgent reinforcements arrived 30. The Black Hawk lifted off, leaving a burning and destroyed facility behind. "Target destroyed," Wynne reported to higher headquarters. "Package secured. Intelligence materials recovered. No American casualties." Cruz, sitting beside Mendoza in the helicopter, looked back at the burning facility. They had dismantled the nerve center of a network that had tried to kill her. The prey was now the predator, and the hunters had been hunted. The war was far from over, but for the first time since that day in Durka Ridge, she felt a profound sense of closure. She had not only survived, she had won. 6 weeks after the Syrian raid, Elena Cruz sat in a briefing room at Camp Pendleton, California, the heart of the Marine Corps on the West Coast. She was no longer a bloodied staff sergeant fighting for her life in a hostile land. She was a survivor, a veteran of battles that few could comprehend, and now a witness to a strategic victory. The intelligence analysts, led by Captain Rebecca Morales, presented the results of their investigation into the captured materials. The scope of what they had discovered was staggering. The network we disrupted was supporting operations in 17 countries, Morales explained to the assembled military and intelligence personnel. They were providing training, weapons, and tactical advice to insurgent groups from Iraq to Afghanistan to North Africa. Crews studied the organizational charts and operational timelines that covered the briefing room walls. The facility they had raided had been a command and control node, coordinating attacks that had killed hundreds of coalition personnel. Its destruction had already led to the disruption of planned operations throughout the region. The war that had begun with her in a dusty street in Durka Ridge had turned out to be just one small part of a much larger global conflict. "What about the personnel we captured?" asked Colonel Ava Lang, who had flown in from Baghdad for the debrief. "Abu Rashid and 3 other high-value targets are providing significant intelligence about network operations," Morales replied. "We've been able to identify and target dozens of additional facilities and personnel, but Cruz was more interested in the human cost of the network's activities. The intelligence reports indicated that the training provided by the Syrian facility had been directly responsible for more sophisticated IED attacks, better coordinated ambushes, and improved assassination techniques that had killed American service members throughout the Middle East. How many American lives did we save by shutting this down?" she asked. Morales consulted her notes. "A conservative estimate is several hundred over the next year." The network was planning major operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and potentially targeting American interests in other regions. It was satisfying to know that her survival of 14 rounds had ultimately led to saving hundreds of American lives. But Cruz was also thinking about the Marines who hadn't survived the war. The network had been operating for years before she accidentally exposed it by refusing to die. "Major Doctor?" Sarah Cheng entered the briefing room with Cruz's final medical evaluation, the last step in her return to full active duty. Despite everything she had been through, Cruz had recovered completely from her wounds and was cleared for any assignment the Marine Corps wanted to give her. "Medically, you're in better condition than most Marines who haven't been shot 14 times, Dr. Cheng said with amazement. "Your recovery has been unprecedented." Cruz wasn't surprised. She had always healed quickly from injuries, and the intensive physical training required by Marine Corps standards had given her the fitness base needed to recover from severe trauma. "What's next?" she asked Colonel Lang. "That depends on what you want to do," Lang replied. "Your actions over the past few months have attracted attention at the highest levels of the Department of Defense. You could have your choice of assignments." Cruz had been thinking about exactly that question during her recovery. She could return to Iraq for another combat tour, accept a training assignment at one of the Marine Corps schools, or pursue advanced military education that would prepare her for higher leadership positions. But her answer had been clear for a while now. "I want to go back to Durka Ridge," she said finally. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone processed her decision. After surviving 14 gunshot wounds, multiple assassination attempts, and a raid into enemy territory, Cruz wanted to return to the city where her war had begun. "Staff Sergeant," Lang said carefully, "you've done more than enough combat time. No one would question your dedication if you chose a safer assignment." "Sir, with respect, Marines are still fighting and dying in Durka Ridge," Cruz said. "The network we disrupted was just one of many threats they're facing. I've learned things about insurgent tactics and psychology that could help keep other Marines alive." Corporal Mendoza, who had been listening quietly to the discussion, finally spoke up. "Cruz, you've proved everything you need to prove. You don't have to go back." Cruz looked at her squad leader, the Marine who had risked his life to save her when she was bleeding from 14 gunshot wounds. "Mendoza, do you remember what you told me in that street, that we don't leave Marines behind?" "Yes. Well, there are still Marines in Durka Ridge, and I'm not leaving them behind." It was a simple statement that captured everything about Cruz's character and motivation. She had survived impossible odds not to become a symbol or a propaganda asset, but to continue serving alongside the Marines who had saved her life. Lang nodded slowly, understanding that some Marines were built to fight regardless of what they had already endured. "If that's what you want, I can arrange it. But you won't be going back as a staff sergeant." Cruz looked puzzled. "Sir? Your actions over the past few months have earned you a promotion to gunnery sergeant," Lang explained. "You'll be returning to Durka Ridge as a senior enlisted leader, with responsibility for training Marines in counterinsurgency tactics." The promotion was recognition of Cruz's tactical skill and leadership under extreme conditions, but it also represented an opportunity to share her hard-won experience with Marines who would face similar threats. "When do I leave?" she asked. 2 weeks. That gives you time to complete advanced training in insurgent psychology and urban warfare tactics. You'll be teaching what you've learned to Marines throughout Al-Anbar province. As the briefing concluded and personnel began filing out of the room, Mendoza remained behind to speak with Cruz privately. "You know, you don't have to prove anything else," he said. "What you've accomplished is already beyond what anyone could expect." Cruz was looking out the window at Camp Pendleton's training areas, where new Marines were learning the skills they would need to survive combat deployments. "It's not about proving anything, Mendoza. It's about finishing the job. The job's already finished. We disrupted the network, captured the leadership, prevented future attacks. The job's finished when Marines stop dying from tactics that could be prevented," she said. "When we've shared everything we've learned with everyone who needs to know it." Mendoza understood that Cruz's decision came from the same place as her refusal to die in a Durka Ridge street, an absolute commitment to the Marines around her and a determination to use her survival for something larger than personal accomplishment. "All right," he said finally, "but I'm going with you." Cruz looked surprised. "Mendoza, you've done 3 tours. You could get orders anywhere you want." "Yeah, well, someone needs to keep you out of trouble," he said with a wry smile. "Besides, I figure if you're going back to Durka Ridge, you'll probably find a way to get shot at again. I want to be there to make sure you survive it." It was exactly the response Cruz had hoped for, but hadn't dared to expect. Mendoza had already risked his life to save her once, and his willingness to return to combat with her represented the kind of loyalty that defined the Marine Corps at its best. 2 weeks later, Gunnery Sergeant Elena Cruz boarded a transport aircraft for the flight back to Iraq. She carried with her everything she had learned about insurgent tactics, network operations, and the psychology of survival under impossible conditions. But more than that, she carried the responsibility of using her experience to keep other Marines alive. She had survived 14 rounds, not through luck, but through training, determination, and the support of Marines who refused to leave her behind. Now it was her turn to make sure that other Marines had the same advantages when they faced their own impossible odds. The aircraft lifted off into the California sunset, carrying Cruz back toward the war that had tried to kill her and failed. But this time, she wasn't going as a target or a survivor. She was going as a teacher, ready to share everything she had learned with the Marines who would need it most. Durka Ridge was waiting, and Cruz was ready to finish what had started with 14 rounds in a dusty street. The war wasn't over, but she had proven that Marines could survive anything and come back stronger. That was a lesson worth teaching. Her final image, a thought that would carry her through the flight and into the next chapter of her life, herself, standing on the rebuilt Echo Aid station, binoculars in hand, watching over a new unit. Scarred but unbreakable, And her message to them, to all of them, a message forged in blood and fire: you survive, you come back, and then you teach them how. Thank you for joining the veteran biker community. The road we've traveled with Gunnery Sergeant Elena Cruz has been an unforgettable journey, one that takes us far beyond the typical stories of combat and survival. It's a testament to the unyielding spirit of a Marine who, against all odds, refused to be broken. Her journey from the brink of death with 14 gunshot wounds to becoming a symbol of strength and a teacher to others is a saga that will inspire us all to look for the courage within ourselves. We believe that every story is a ride, and this one has been particularly epic. The detail and depth we strive for are a reflection of our dedication to honoring these narratives. Your support means everything to us and fuels our passion to continue unearthing and sharing these powerful, authentic stories. If Elena's fight captivated you, if you felt the tension in the hospital room, the thrill of the sniper's nest, or the determination on the rooftop of the aid station, please show your appreciation by hitting that like button. Sharing this video with friends who value grit, heroism, and immersive storytelling helps us reach a wider audience and build our community. We're not just a channel, we're a community of riders and storytellers, and we want to hear from you. Your insights and opinions are the engine that drives us forward. What part of Elena's incredible journey resonated with you the most? Was it her bravery in the ambush, her audacious plan in Baghdad, or her final selfless act of returning to Durka Ridge to teach the next generation of Marines? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback directly influences the content we create and helps us better understand what you, our community, want to see next. But the adventure doesn't end here. The Veteran Biker universe is filled with more tales of valor, grit, and triumph. We have countless stories of courage forged in the fires of conflict and the quiet determination of those who have served. We invite you to continue the ride with us. Click on one of the videos now appearing on your screen to explore another story, another hero, another journey. Each video is a new road to travel, a new lesson to learn, and a new adventure to experience. From all of us at Veteran Biker, thank you for being a part of our family. Your passion for these stories is what keeps our wheels turning. Until next time, ride safe, stay vigilant, and never forget the lessons learned on the battlefield and on the open road.